First of all, I want to welcome everyone on behalf of His Eminence, Metropolitan Sebastian of Atlanta, and of course, our Proestamino here at St. John the Divine, the Reverend Dr. Nicholas Lowe, and all of you for taking the time to be here with us, with His Grace, Bishop Demetrios of Mokisos, to discuss his book, Grace Unbound, the Sacred Activism of an Orthodox Bishop. I'm not going to waste a whole lot of time talking about his lengthy CV, his resume, and all the things he has accomplished in his ministry. So I encourage you all to Google him tonight and you will read about him. Instead, I let you know that we've known each other more years than we want to admit, over 40, which means we are getting older. I'm not so sure wiser, but we're getting older. So we'll ask some questions of His Grace, we'll listen to his responses, and then we'll open it up to the floor so that we have some interactivity between His Grace and yourselves. So first of all, welcome, my friend.
Thank you.
It's good to see you.
Thank you, Nick.
Your Grace, and this is not a pun, what is grace?
First of all, it's not necessarily politeness or kindness, but it's God's active presence breaking into human limitation. We like to imagine God operating with our moral logic. In other words, rewarding the good, correcting the bad, affirming the orderly. But grace does not behave that way. Grace interrupts. Grace disturbs. Grace appears where it's not logically supposed to appear. It refuses to follow our expectations. You see, we live in categories, deserving and undeserving, insider, outsider, safe and unsafe, guilty, innocent, sacred and profane, and grace doesn't allow for that. Grace ignores those categories. Grace is not a transaction. It's not earned. It's what God's love existed before we calculated worth. And you know, what I slowly learned, and sometimes reluctantly, is that grace becomes most visible where our instincts hesitate. Not only in admirable lives, but in complicated ones. Not only in virtue, but also in wounded humanity. And I think that's what grace is all about. It's freely given by God. It's not something we earn or deserve. And that's how we as humans, made in the image and likeness of God, need to treat other humans.
And so you say grace unbound. Mm-hmm. Is that only, does that only relate to God's grace upon us, or is it is it our grace to others?
It's our grace to others as well, because God can't be contained, nor can His grace be contained. And where our instincts hesitate, grace takes over. And it's not only, again, something that's deserved, but it's unbounded, just like God's love is unbounded. There's something I want to read that I saw recently, which I think exemplifies exactly what I'm talking about. And it's something you should recognize. I think you and your coworkers have entered into that grace. This is part of a recent press release that OPAC released recently. And part of it reads, "We will defend sacred space, physical, moral, intellectual, and spiritual. We will speak for the voiceless, listen to the unheard, and support the vulnerable. And we will continue to affirm that communion in Christ is stronger than any political narrative imposed upon it." So you are practicing grace as well. And your organization is, I'm very proud of that fact. But when I read it, it resonated with my work and the work of this book, really. So that's what I think Grace is to me, and through the pages of the book it comes through.
Thank you, Your Grace. Sacred activism. We hear the word activism today, and it has a negative connotation. One way, left, right, up, down, borders being put between people. We use that word as activism, but I'm not so sure that's what the intent of the book is. So I ask you, Your Grace, describe sacred activism.
I believe sacred activism is something within our own Byzantine history. In the book, as well as in my ministry, I was accosted by a radio interviewer that said, "What business does the church have involving itself in activism against the death penalty? Why are you involved?" And I said, "We're just merely reclaiming our Orthodox roots and heritage." It is speaking to the emperor when things were unjust. It was St. Basil the Great setting up orphanages and places for women and hospices and places for the marginalized. And it's exactly what we're doing as church and what we need to do as Christians and as members of the human family. So sacred activism is realizing the sacredness of the person, that we're all made in the image and likeness of God, and that my work and our work really to abolish the death penalty, which we did in the state of Illinois, was because we believe that all persons are worthy of life, because all, no matter what they have done, deserve life and deserve that spark of sacredness because they're made in the image and likeness of God, no matter what they've done. And that forgiveness and grace needs to come through.
I dare to say this, but I think you will agree, if you're honest, that your ministry has always gone against the wind.
Yes, it has.
Taking up causes that the church did not speak about or, quite frankly, did not want to speak about. Defense of the unborn, the death penalty, and maybe most controversial yet successful were your efforts in starting the Bishop's task force on AIDS. Mm-hmm. Your activism has been published across the country in major newspapers, and Hollywood stars even came calling and by your side, mm-hmm. just like our friend John Stamos, right. Who, if you buy the book, you'll see a picture of a young Bishop Demetrios and a young Nick Furis.
And we both had more hair.
And we both, God knows, we both had more hair. So let's talk about the first. Let's talk about the Bishop's Task Force on AIDS. Let's talk about a friend of yours.
The Bishop's Task Force on AIDS was the first of its kind in the Western Hemisphere as a Greek Orthodox or Orthodox Christian response to the pandemic at the time. The task force was composed of doctors. Everyone was Orthodox except our ecumenical interfaith observers and advisors. We came into the game, the fight against AIDS, as Orthodox Christians late, like we tend to do. But that being late also gave us the opportunity to learn from others' mistakes. So we had doctors, and we had social workers, and clergy, and ecumenical interfaith observers. But the task force started, and I'll read a section from the book on how it started and what transpired to bring about that ministry. At first, the Archdiocese was not very excited about the ministry, and certain hierarchs certainly were not. But after a while, they said, "Oh, look, we have an AIDS ministry." I said, "No, you don't. We have an AIDS ministry." But they came on board. I could paraphrase a quote from Schopenhauer that said, "Truth passes through 3 stages. First, it's persecuted. Then it's ridiculed. And thirdly, it's accepted as self-evident." And we did go through that, those 3 phases. But allow me to read a passage on how the task force started. Can you help me hold it? Chapter 6, Meeting Bob, March 1992. I had been a priest for only a couple of months when the telephone in my basement office at the diocese buzzed, and the receptionist transferred a call to me. "Hello," I answered, "Father Dimitri." I was still getting used to saying that. "Father, I'm hoping you can help me," the man at the other end of the phone began. "I'm calling the diocese because I'm sick, and I'd like a priest to come see me. Can you arrange that?" "I'll try to help," I said. "What's your name?" "Bob," he answered. "I live here in Chicago." "Bob, do you attend a parish? Have you called your parish priest?" "Yes, I have. He won't visit me." He paused, then added bluntly, "I have AIDS." A cold fear swirled in my chest. It was 1992, and the diagnosis of acquired immunodeficiency syndrome, or AIDS, was as terrifying a diagnosis as existed. It was deadly. In the United States, a staggering 190,000 people had already died of it, most of them gay men. I had a basic knowledge of AIDS. It was caused by the human immunodeficiency virus. People contracted it mostly through unprotected sex or shared needles from intravenous drug use. It was not contagious, but infectious, and it killed those it infected because there was no cure. People were afraid of AIDS and those who had it. Bob's parish priest was no exception. He had made excuse after excuse not to see him. Bob said the priest, who had known Bob since he was little, probably feared that if he visited him, he would contract the disease. Bob, sick, isolated, scared, longed to know that his church had not abandoned him, that God still loved him. What should I do, I thought, gripping the receiver. I felt anger at the priest's unwitting ignorance, as well as an overwhelming compassion for Bob, who was being hurt by that ignorance. Jesus' words came to mind. "I was sick, and you visited me." "What's your address, Bob?" I asked. "I'll come see you." We set a date for a visit. On the appointed day, I climbed into my car and I put my priest's travel case on the seat beside me. I felt my stomach knot as I drove toward the home. This was my first time visiting someone diagnosed with AIDS, and I realized I was not sure what I was going to do. I prayed that my visit would make a difference to Bob. I was also keenly aware of how green I was as a priest. I hoped Bob wouldn't be disappointed by a visit from a rookie. I parked outside the house, picked up my priest's case, and stepped into the warm spring air. That March morning was so beautiful, the first warm spring day that hinted at the sultry summer to come. I almost regretted stepping into the shade of the unfamiliar porch and ringing the doorbell. It was 11 o'clock in the morning. The front door was opened by a neatly dressed middle-aged woman, kind but hesitant. She welcomed me respectfully in Greek, lowered her eyes, and with nervous gestures invited me in. I followed her quick steps and soon found myself passing through a living room which had each piece of furniture covered with a translucent plastic drop cloth. The overall effect was unsettling. As we walked on through the modest, well-organized home, I glimpsed the sheen of plastic in other rooms as well. The woman led me into a sunny kitchen at her invitation. I took a seat at the kitchen table, and I heard the crinkle of plastic as I sat on a chair swathed in plastic wrap. She sat down across from me, clasping and unclasping her hands on the table. When she looked at me, her eyes revealed hope and doubt. "Father," she said quietly, almost whispering, "I just ask one thing. Please keep what happens here today a secret. Don't say anything to anyone." "I promise," I said. Of course, the fact that I'm relating this to you now could rightly make you question if I kept that promise. I heard footsteps and turned to see a man enter the sun-filled kitchen where the woman and I sat. He was emaciated, sunken eyes resting in a gaunt face. The collar of his t-shirt loosely around his skinny neck, and the shirt hung from his bony shoulders. His arms were unnaturally thin. I kept my gaze level, trying not to stare or look away. I had read about the ravages of AIDS, of course, but the reality of Bob's suffering was a shock. It was difficult to grasp that the skeletal man before me was only 26 years old. "Hi, I'm Father Dimitri, the priest you spoke with on the phone," I said, standing and introducing myself. I extended my hand to him, prepared to shake his hand or to receive the traditional kiss given to a priest. "I'm Bob Charalambos," he said. "I'm glad you came." He took my hand in his and kissed it. Then he sat down in a chair that was also bound in plastic wrap. I sat down too. It appeared to me that he did not have long to live. Bob looked at me evenly across the kitchen table. His eyes, though sunken, were clear. "Father, I asked you to visit because I'm going to die soon," he said. His palms turned upward, resigningly in silent appeal. "My priest won't come to see me, and I can't go to church. I would terrify other people." He added, looking at his mother, "But I still believe in God." I nodded. "I'm glad you called," I said. "You did the right thing." He smiled. His mother excused herself and left us alone in the kitchen to talk. Bob told me about himself. His parents had immigrated from Greece, and he had grown up in Chicago. He had an older brother married. Not that long ago, Bob said he had been muscular and brawny, and he made a living loading and delivering mattresses for a mattress dealer. Then he began to lose weight and tire more easily. He didn't know what was wrong, so he went to see his doctor. They didn't find anything. Eventually, he was tested for HIV. The test came back positive. Positive. That hit him hard. It was completely unexpected. He thought that HIV/AIDS was isolated to the gay community. He also wasn't sure when or how he had contracted the virus. He had no history of using needles or receiving transfusions. He wasn't gay. His sexual activity had been very limited. He told me, but it appeared that's how he had contracted HIV. "I think I may have been infected by the girl I took to the high school prom," he said somewhat sheepishly. "The prom?" I repeated. "Yes," he said, rolling his eyes. I tried not to laugh, but I couldn't help it. He joined me, and the laughter lit up his face. He asked, "Did you go to prom?" "Yes," I said, "twice." At that moment, we were simply two friends talking about a high school dance. Out of that experience, when I got back, and the rest of the book explains it, to the office, I was very angry with the priest, who was a senior priest in Chicago. He should have known better, but he didn't. So I at first was angry, and I told Metropolitan, then Bishop Kantzavelos, we have to do something to educate our priests. It's not really his fault. Although in 1992, he should have known better. So we just established the Bishop's Task Force on AIDS. We produced a video with Nick, with John Stamos being the host. It's called A Family Like Ours, and it talks about the struggles of a man living with HIV who succumbed to the virus. We went on from there to make pamphlets and booklets in both Greek and in English, and we educated our clergy. We had retreats. We spoke at parishes, not just in Chicago, but slowly throughout the country, and the task force was successful in its mission of education and advocacy. So it's one ministry that ran its course. Today, well, then we were hoping that HIV would be treated like diabetes, a chronic disease. We thought there's not going to be a cure anytime soon. Maybe that'll happen in the future. Here we are in 2026, and there are TV commercials about take this shot, and you're HIV positive, and you could live a full life. Take it once a month. Take this pill twice a month. We never thought that would happen. And speaking about it so publicly and so openly without the stigma that we had back then is refreshing. It's also difficult because we lost a whole generation of talented people, young people. But at least through God's grace, we were able to establish that task force and do our part in educating the Greek Orthodox clergy and faithful about HIV/AIDS.
I think it's important to remind the people listening that you were not a hierarch at this time.
No.
You
no.
were a priest, a young priest.
I was not even the chancellor of the metropolis. I was a deacon, then a priest, and I was working as the registrar of the metropolis of Chicago, which is processing weddings, baptisms, deaths, and divorces. I wasn't in full-time parish assignment yet.
A little sidebar, when I read this, I chuckled to myself, as I think a few others chuckled. Growing up in our homes, we all had plastic on the nice furniture.
Not like that, huh?
But as you read it, and I saw it again yesterday, I understood that wrap was because of the lack of knowledge of the family.
Yep.
And the fact that if he sits in the chair and I sit in the chair, I might contract the disease. It's come a long way.
It was worse at the time because, as I relate in the book, before I got involved, serendipitously, a woman named Angelique Montanes, who was on my task force, she's a social worker, was in Chicago, and this family contacted her. They had isolated Bob in his room and left his food outside his door. And he told me that it's in the book too, the thing he missed the most was his mother's hugs, and that she wouldn't even touch him. So after a while, coming to the house and watching him kiss me on both cheeks and me embracing him and me communing him, they slowly, by that example, were able to do the same.
If you will allow just a little bit of personal privilege.
Sure.
You are attending tonight a church of St. John the Divine, that when this was going on, our church was so progressive, and it was because of the film that you did that caused another film to be made, and we had a gentleman named George come down to Jacksonville. Mm-hmm. We were at our previous church on Atlantic Boulevard, and it was so moving to see most of the church line up behind him for communion.
That's great.
That's, I think, what this church represents. The forethought, the belief in the body of Christ, and we now have at its helm someone who continues that, and I think that's why all of you are here. So
I'd like to read a
grateful.
short, cute passage,
Please.
if I may, because my first cousin is here from Clearwater, and she'll resonate with this, to show you that HIV/AIDS was known but not known, and how we fought it. So here's a short anecdote which I look back at and smile. My Yaya Maria, my maternal grandmother, was an educated woman, one of the first teachers ever hired to teach Greek language afternoon schools and Saturday day schools in Chicago. She had heard about HIV/AIDS, but did not fully know how it was transmitted. She did know that if it was contracted, it could be fatal. When my siblings or I went out for the evening and she happened to be at our parents' home, she would sharply caution us, "Be careful of the AIDS." Yes, Yaya, we promise, we will. Be careful of the AIDS. I'm sorry, but I think it was funny.
Well, that sounds like Yaya.
Yeah.
Okay, so you, in your career, caused quite a political stir in Illinois. Mm-hmm. So much so that you got the attention of Oprah, mm-hmm. Miss Oprah Winfrey. Mm-hmm. And to get Miss Oprah Winfrey to pay attention to you takes a lot. So obviously you were doing something, and knowing you weren't going to stop until you succeeded on some level. I know this must be very personal to you. Can you talk to us about Andrew?
Sure. Not only did Oprah get upset, not upset, she was concerned. I locked horns with the then governor, George Ryan, who a lot of people credit with the abolition, but he was not an abolitionist. And throughout the book, you'll see a completely different personal experience I had with him. Kind of vociferous as well. But Andrew Kantzavelos is the last person, I shouldn't say it, but I'll say it. He was the last person executed in the state of Illinois. And I'll read a passage about meeting him and how we started that journey towards abolition. I'll do something about that. Sorry.
He needs a beacon.
Sorry. Okay. That's the forward. Sorry. Okay. Chapter 1. The Visitor Room. February 27th, 1999. I woke up before my alarm went off and stared into the darkness. Grisly images of crime scenes and murder victims' faces had haunted my sleep, and a sinking feeling of foreboding stirred in my gut. What am I doing? I thought. Seminary had not prepared me for this. A shower didn't dispel my uneasiness, but at least I was up and moving. I dressed quickly. I wanted to get going. That explained why I was taking the elevator down to the lobby of my building now fully 15 minutes before Fred was scheduled to pick me up. The elevator doors opened and I stepped out into the lobby. Through the building's glass entrance, I saw the empty driveway. I checked my watch, willing time to move faster, then paced, occasionally glancing out the front door. The morning sky was bright blue. A perfect day for a road trip, I thought, then caught myself. Road trip? I checked my watch again, 8 o'clock. Right on time, Fred pulled up to the curb. I pushed through the revolving door and stepped outside. A bracing wind off Lake Michigan made me duck my head. It felt like an insult on an already uneasy morning. "Good morning, Father," Fred said brightly as I got into his car. His face radiated good cheer, and I had to smile. Fred had generously rearranged his Saturday schedule so he could drive me today, so I wouldn't have to be alone. He had even brought 2 cups of coffee. I gratefully took a sip, and while it wasn't enough to dispel the tension in my stomach, it helped. Fred slid smoothly into traffic, and soon we left Chicago behind, heading southwest. Fred chanted amiably. Out of my window, I saw the frosting of snow on the industrial buildings and took a couple of slow breaths. Fred was an attorney and a friend. Where Fred served pro bono, Fred was an attorney and a friend. I was a priest. I worked at the Greek Orthodox Diocese of Chicago, where Fred served pro bono as legal counsel. It was February 27th, 1999. A few days before, I received a call at the diocese from a woman named Theodora, whom I had known since the earliest days of my ministry. It had been a pressure-filled morning. An afternoon deadline was looming, but when I recognized her voice, I leaned back in my chair, glad for the respite. "Father Demetrios," she said, "I'm wondering if you'd be willing to meet with a man on death row." The question was so unexpected that I momentarily forgot the paperwork on my desk. "Of course," I said, pulling out a notepad. "Tell me about him." Theodora had felt called to prison ministry 2 years before, she said, and a priest had suggested she visit a man in the Pontiac Correctional Center, not too far from where she lived. "He's on death row," the priest had cautioned. "Are you okay with that?" Death row, she had thought. But aloud she said, "Okay." The priest had given her the man's name, Andrew Kantzavelos. Theodora had arranged to visit Andrew. She was used to rolling up her sleeves and getting things done, but she had never visited a prison, much less death row. She had been a little uneasy, she told me. Andrew didn't know her. What would he think? Yet there she was, a few days later, sitting across the table from a man in shackles. Theodora introduced herself, speaking English with a warm Greek accent. She told Andrew that God had not given up on him. She asked him about himself. Andrew answered, but the hardness on his face did not yield. It didn't go very well, she admitted to me. The awkward visit had lasted only 15 minutes. She was discouraged as she stood up to go, but she asked Andrew, would you like me to come again? Yet a pause. Yes, he answered. I'll be here next week, she promised. She kept her word. Little by little, Andrew came to trust this kind weekly visitor. She urged him to pray. She spoke of faith and reassured Andrew that God loved him. His life had purpose, she told him, even on death row. He gradually let down his defenses, and over the next 2 years, they established a genuine relationship, she said. His bitterness seemed to lessen and then disappear. He started to pray. She gave him a gold cross necklace, and he wore it all the time. He asked Theodora if he can call her Ma, and she said yes. She witnessed his change of heart and the profound difference it made in him. What do you think caused that? I asked. He met God, she said.
So you went and you met this young man. Mm-hmm. Can you describe in this dark, dreary environment how you brought light to him before he was executed?
I'm not going to give you all the details because I want you to buy the book. But I think he brought light to me, because seeing him in shackles coming into the room is seeing Christ in shackles, who spent 3 days on death row, and he was innocent of all sin. So if we look at Andrew in that light, even though he was accused of doing despicable things, I don't believe personally that he was guilty of the crime he was convicted of. There was so much mismanagement. He was part of a group called the Ripper Crew, where 4 men, each of them got a different sentence. And they, some of them did heinous things. They were mostly crimes against women, dismemberment, and sexual activity that's unspeakable. But for this particular crime, I don't think Andrew was guilty. He was not a choir boy. He did other things in his life, but you don't execute someone for a crime he might have committed. More importantly, we shouldn't kill. It just perpetuates the violence. A professor at Valparaiso University, Richard Stith, wrote, executing the offender or the debtor doesn't pay a debt to society, it merely kills the debtor. So going into that room and having him come in with his hands shackled, I had to sit in a particular chair that would stencil visitor, and the other one said inmate. There was 3 that said visitor, and they were bolted to the ground as if we're gonna pick them up and do something. It's kind of unnerving at first, because I kept looking at his hands, thinking, did he really kill somebody with those hands? But then when you got past it and realized this person is made in the image and likeness of God. And we actually grew up in the same parish. We didn't know it. It was a huge parish, the Assumption Church in Chicago on the west side. We had 2 or 3 divine liturgies on a Sunday. We had 3 priests. It was huge. So we didn't even know each other, but we were about the same age, and we went to the same church, but obviously our lives took different paths. But the thing that was so capricious about his sentencing is the leader, Robert Getch, got life in prison. His brother, Tommy Cucurellis, is out now. He served his term. He got 40 years. There was another man, I forgot his name offhand. He was in prison for life, and Andrew was the only one executed. So it doesn't, why would one be executed, one get life, and one get 40 years for the same crime? The system was so broken after meeting Andrew that we had to do something. And that's when I joined the Illinois Coalition to Abolish the Death Penalty. I eventually became the president of the organization, and we did it. We abolished it. It took us 11 years, and by the way, this March 9th, will mark the 15th anniversary of Governor Quinn signing the abolition bill into law in the state of Illinois. So I'm very proud of that.
Let's piggyback on that and talk about politics. Religion and politics, the two things you shouldn't really talk about, at least in the same sentence. And we know that you were very active in the pro-life movement. You represented the Archbishop, the GOA in Washington many, many times. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to ask a pretty loaded question. Should we, as Orthodox Christians, use our faith as a fanadi, as a lighthouse, to make political decisions as citizens? I know we're not supposed to mix the two, but I think we need to ask the question.
If we are living our orthodoxy authentically, the answer is absolutely yes. If you want to live orthodoxy on Sundays and holidays and swing a censer and kiss an icon, which is fine, and keep the letter of the law for the fast, which is fine, and not couple it with activism, what are you doing? On Holy Monday evening, we'll hear a gospel of woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites. And one verse that speaks to me always is, you tithe mint and dill and cumin, and forget the weightier matters of the law, mercy and justice and love. These you ought to have done without neglecting the others. So we need both. Yes, I'm not saying that we should talk about candidates from a pulpit. I would never do that, or political parties. But I, and I'm sure Father would, preach about issues. The sanctity of life is something near and dear to should be near and dear to all of us. And as Orthodox Christians, we are pro-life, from womb to tomb. You cannot profess that fallacy that some lives are innocent and therefore sacred, and others are guilty and profane. There you put people into categories, and that's exactly what happened in World War II during the Nazis, when the call was for a Judenrein Europe, a Jew-clean Europe, as opposed to a Judenfrei Europe, which was a Jew-free Europe. So they were dirty, diseased, less than human. And if we start doing that, we're just as guilty. So yes, if we're going to be authentic Orthodox Christians and live our orthodoxy, not wear it on the cuff of our sleeve and have a prayer rope and go around and saying Kyrie eleison, without action, St. James tells us, faith without works is dead. So yeah, I do believe that. And just like our ancestors did, St. Basil the Great, St. John Chrysostom, advocated to the powers that be at the time, we need to do the same. Be it life issues, be it anything else that, right now, the latest thing in Illinois that's passed, much to my chagrin, and they did it very surreptitiously, was assisted suicide. And it's macabre, it's disgusting, it's not right. And that's something we have to, every Orthodox Christian should be concerned with.
Your Grace, what do you hope the reader, both Orthodox and non-Orthodox, can garner from reading your words about your ministry and your experiences?
I'm hoping the book is not an Orthodox ghetto book, as Father Nick taught me once, and I've used it. We want to get out from under the dome and get out into the world. And I'm hoping that anyone who picks up the book can maybe have their eyes opened and see the worth of every human being, and to see life is sacred, and to take action. We can all take action. This past Sunday, you heard a gospel that's very moving about the Last Judgment. And the Master says, come into my kingdom. And the people say, well, why? Why should we come in? Well, you fed the naked, you fed the hungry, you clothed the naked, you visited those in prison, you visited the sick. And they said, well, when did we do that? So when you did it to the least of my sisters and brothers, you did it to me. But they had no clue they were doing it for Christ. And the others were condemned. And they said, well, had we known it was you, well, guess what? These are my sisters and brothers. This is Christ in the world. and that's what you should have done. It's not moving the legislature into abolishing the death penalty. We can't all do that. But you can all give a hungry person a sandwich. You can all give a thirsty person a drink. You can all visit someone who's sick. You can all go to a prison, or even start, if you haven't already, I'm surprised if you didn't, have a prison ministry from this parish. Those are things anybody can do. And I would hope and challenge anybody who reads the book to do so. Hopefully, you'll be inspired to do so.
I know you profess to be, quote unquote, retired from active ministry, serving the GOA, which you are. But Your Grace, today, aside from the book and your speaking tours, what do you see as your ministry?
You spoke about politics earlier, and this is a delicate thing to say, but I'm going to say it. The cost of this ministry was my retirement. It's nothing I really wanted. It's also mentioned in the book. But because of the powers that be that were not too pleased with that ministry, I took a step back from active ministry. However, writing the book was part of it. People seeking out guidance and assistance is still part of it. I have 2 people in prison I still minister to. I do travel, and I'm able to serve in some locations, which is very refreshing. And I think that continuing this work of social justice and activism from an Orthodox perspective is something I want to do. In fact, we've just made a Illinois nonprofit. It's called the Moral Alliance, and we're going to do the work of this book in the world, and we're hoping that, of course, OPAC will help us, and we could help you. But it's something we want to continue, and we're putting together our board now to continue that social justice and activism on behalf of the marginalized and those who are on the fringes of society, no matter what the cost.
Just so everyone here knows, obviously you see the book is available here after we conclude for purchase and signing. It will be available in audio on March 12th, which is very exciting, and in paperback in January. And you were contacted by a publisher in Greece, and they have the rights now to publish it in Greek. So congratulations, Your Grace, on that. With all of that, let's hear from you. Anyone have any questions? Just raise your hands. Or have we answered every question?
You take them,
No, I'll repeat the question. Okay. Anybody have any questions?
See, this is the part, Nick, where there's about a 7-second delay as everyone's embarrassed, but after a little bit, they're going to ask.
Yeah.
Okay, 7 seconds.
Yes, please.
There's one, see? Oh, she wasn't upset. She was encouraging. It was something that she believed in. I hope we didn't get that impression.
No, maybe.
She was not upset at all. It was just the opposite.
Oprah was on your side.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Come on. Not one question.
The blonde lady.
Yes. Say it again.
He wasn't scared to get involved in politics and stand up for people that nobody else would.
She asks, if I heard her correctly, were you not afraid, personally, to stand up? And again, he was only a priest then. He wasn't. Some of the things that you read about, you were just a priest at the time. Were you not scared to stand up? And I think I know the answer to that, but were you not scared?
Regarding HIV or regarding the death penalty or both? Both?
No, not the disease.
I can't hear her.
Upsetting certain people that could maybe harm you professionally or something.
Were you not scared to harm your own personal, professional career?
No. No, I wasn't. Because at the time, I had someone protecting me. Metropolitan Kantzavelos, who was a senior member of the synod, a gracious gentleman, a person who lived through an occupation, And he comes through in the book very well, and he protected my ministry when we were being attacked for the HIV/AIDS ministry. In fact, there's a section in the book where he knew hunger. And we have in Chicago a soup kitchen, Feed the Hungry program at our cathedral. It used to be once a month, now it's every week. And the priest at the time and the president of the parish council came to see him because the homeless were making the chairs dirty. And Metropolitan Yaakov said, first of all, the Philotokos ladies pay extra for cleaning, number one. And number two, I'd rather see you leave, Father, before the homeless leave. So he was kind and gentle, but firm, and he protected this ministry that he believed in. So I wasn't scared. Unfortunately, he fell asleep in the Lord in 2017, and soon after I found myself here in St. Augustine. So thank you for that opportunity.
Anyone else?
She's got another question.
One more question.
Please.
Do you believe that those people that found God, at the end, maybe they forgave themselves for the mistakes they have made?
Do you believe that some of the people that you've met most probably have done bad things?
Yeah.
In the end, forgave themselves for their actions before they passed away?
In the case of Andrew, I think yes, but that took a while. People spend quite a bit of time on death row before they're executed, no longer in Illinois, of course. And I think yes, it takes work. That's probably the hardest thing we see in our ministry. When people come to confession and you read the words of absolution and tell them about their being forgiven, them not forgiving themselves, I think is a greater sin, because if God can forgive you, who are you not to forgive yourself? So I think your question is excellent, but I think Andrew did at the end. I do believe that. There's somebody, that gentleman.
Yes, sir.
Most people's politics are driven by fear. How is yours able to transcend that?
Could you repeat that one more time?
Most people's politics is driven by fear. How are you able to transcend?
Most people's politics
Yeah.
are driven by fear.
Yes.
How do you see one transcending that?
Well, excellent question. To transcend the fear, in order to do the work of social justice and activism. That's what you're asking? I think you have to somehow put that aside and see what is the greater good and what is God calling us to do as faithful Orthodox Christians. People are being persecuted and dying throughout the world for just being a Christian in many places. Nigeria, Serbia, of all places. And just for being a Christian. And if they can withstand and witness their faith in the face of death and persecution, who and how are we threatened by a laugh or by fear of ridicule? I like to look at that and say, if they can live through this, why can't we get over that fear and prejudice? Yes?
I meant more the fear of the other side. People are Republicans because they're afraid of Democrats. People are Democrats because they're afraid of Republicans.
What is that?
How do you get past that?
Republicans are Republicans because they fear Democrats. Democrats are Democrats, they fear Republicans. How we
God.
can get past all of that?
I have no clue. That's one area that, I don't know, but let me tell you a story. I was visiting a parish in a city named Racine, Wisconsin, which is part of the metropolis of Chicago. And Racine is very big with the Green Bay Packers. They play football.
Very good, Your Grace.
And the Chicago Bears, and they play football too.
Yes, they do.
And so some woman asked me who I was rooting for, And I said, well, you know, people ask me if I'm a Democrat or Republican, and I tell them the same thing as your question. I said, some of my people are Democrats, some of my people are Republicans, and I always stand with my people. And that sort of ended the conversation. So I don't really have an answer for a political fear. And I think that is not the question. The question's a good one. The reality is shallow. Why should we fear each other if we're all American citizens? And I know it's tough times right now, and I know things are tense. I'm not blind to that intention. I'm not in favor of the killings of any kind. People I don't agree with and people I agree with personally, that's wrong. When violence escalates to that point, then we have to stop and take a step back and say, no, this is wrong. No matter what political party you're with, killing and that kind of violence is not acceptable. But I'm sorry I don't have a better answer for you.
Yes, please.
It's a political question because that was such a thought-provoking question. Just overall, Your Grace, your stance on America was established based on biblical rights and God.
Yeah.
We have Democrats, we have Republicans, we have center, independents, whatever. Today's climate, it seems like socialism is starting to want to creep in. What's your take on that?
That's beyond the scope of my book, isn't it? But again,
Well, yeah, because it's Grace Unbound. It's still what are your thoughts and how do we move forward
If-
as Orthodox Christians giving grace?
I think first and foremost, we need to live our orthodoxy and be authentic Christians, be authentic Orthodox Christians. If one embraces one political system over another, that's your personal choice. And if someone is embracing socialism to a degree that others find offensive or threatening to the country, I firmly believe that hopefully our Constitution and those people in power will listen to their constituents and fight that. It's up to us to stand up. I hate this expression, but I'm going to use it. We have to speak truth to power. And that's where we come in. As citizens, we do have that right still to speak up, even though sometimes it might be difficult to do so out of fear. But we still have that right, and we should do it. And I think that whatever political system anyone wants or believes in has the right to advocate for that. Which one's going to win out? I have no clue. But I think that we have the provisions and the foresight and the foundation as Orthodox Christians to speak that truth to power. We have examples through history. Which was the saint father that made the emperor stand outside for 3 days before he repented? I forgot. There was an archbishop that made the emperor to repent for whatever he did, stand in the snow for 3 days before he repented. The emperor. And yet he did it. So yeah, we have a great responsibility. If we believe we have the fullness of faith, put it into action.
Yeah. Thank you.
Please.
Let's get off the politics, please.
Your Grace, where does the Archdiocese stand on prison ministries? I know our parish was recently reestablished.
Mhm. As far as I know, they're pretty open to it. I know that there was a person involved in prison ministry, Father Manny Manzouras, years ago. He's in Troy, New York, but he started that ministry of the Archdiocese years ago. And I know different metropolises have set it up. Maybe not in the metropolis, but different parishes within a metropolis. They're all in favor of it, of course.
And now we have I sit on the
Oh,
board.
yes, the Orthodox Prison Ministry. I spoke
Orthodox,
to them.
right.
Yeah, I spoke. I was a
Right.
keynote for them.
Right. Orthodox Christian
Prison ministry.
Prison ministry is now the umbrella of all Orthodox.
It's under the Assembly of
That's-
Orthodox Bishops.
Right, it's under the assembly, and so, and it's very active.
Pan-Orthodox?
Yes.
Yes,
The
absolutely.
Assembly of Canonical Orthodox Bishops of America has a number of agencies that they adopt, that they give their imprimatur to, if you will, to use a Latin term. And that's one of the major ones. In fact, it's run by a son of a Greek Orthodox priest.
Right.
Actually, his father's my classmate.
Well, there you go.
So it's a very good ministry. It's very active. Yes? Oh, I'm sorry, Charlie.
I just want to say that our own Father Milton, 25, 30 years ago, took it upon himself, and I don't think it was anything official, just took it upon himself to create a prison ministry here in this parish.
Right. Father Milton did, and he used to come out and say, I need cookies. And when he said I needed cookies, that meant you went home and you baked cookies, and that meant that he was going to prison. And Father Stephen Pauly was very active in that out in Denver. I think all of these ministries, I mean, you want to talk about activism, one can make the argument, Your Grace, that Christ is the greatest activist of all time. And if you listen to his, not rules, I don't think they're rules, I think the way he lived and the way he offered eternal life to people, and you can't be all things to all people, but you can certainly do the Beatitudes, couldn't you?
Sure, but he also, don't forget, got angry.
Oh, yeah.
And there was a time when he turned over the money changers in the temple and said, this is wrong. And he took a rope and he turned over the tables, and yeah. So he was a social activist.
Yes, he was.
And certainly, and also, like I said earlier, spent 3 days on death row. I think all those examples. Somebody asked me at one of these types of things, it was Father Chris Petropoulos on his radio program. Was there any saint that inspired this work? I said, well, throughout our history, yes, but I think Christ himself inspires the work by telling us how we're going to be saved, what we need to do, and do it. It's really quite simple. I mean, it's dangerous, and it's dangerous in that it's not easy work. And if anybody wants to go into this line of work, I'd say be prepared for a lot of backlash, for a lot of hypocritical criticism, but you have to stand firmly on the truth of Jesus Christ.
Anyone else? Yes.
Oh, 2 questions.
On the sanctity of life,
Right.
most especially on death row,
Right.
how are we to treat those people who have done heinous, heinous acts?
One of the criticisms I received when I was advocating for Andrew was exactly that. And I said, I don't want to open the prison doors and let the murderers go out free, but I do not want to see them executed. Also in Illinois, and I'm sure here in Florida, we had 17 people exonerated for outright innocence. One 4 days before his scheduled execution, and the rightful murderer was discovered by journalist students from Northwestern University, not even lawyers or judges or prosecutors or anything like that. 4 days before. We've also executed juvenile offenders. We're one of a handful of countries that does that. If you're a juvenile offender, we will still execute you. And we are one of 2 industrialized countries in the world that still execute, us and China. Of the juvenile offenders, Afghanistan, Iran, Iraq, and us execute juvenile offenders. So the system was so broken that we don't know who is really innocent and guilty. So better yet, don't kill anybody. Better that one guilty person go free than you execute 4 or 5 innocent ones. I think that the question is insightful. It's difficult as a human being. I know if one of my family members was murdered that way, viciously, I don't know how I would react, but I want to say that I will want to see that person in prison the rest of their lives without the possibility of parole. Executing them will not bring my loved one back. It will not undo the crime, and it does not serve as retribution. It's retributive, yes. It does serve as retribution, but it's not going to bring closure to you, trust me. There's a woman named Jennifer Bishop. She wrote a book. Her sister was murdered gruesomely, and the child in her womb was cut out of her. And she and her sister forgave the person and advocated that he not be executed, and he wasn't. And that took a lot of courage, I think, on her part. It's not going to pay a debt to society. It's not going to bring closure to your family. It's just going to perpetuate the violence. And we don't have that right. Only God has that right to take that life. Did the person do something wrong? If you're absolutely certain, yes, he or she did something wrong. But don't execute them, no matter what.
Yes.
Your Grace, when starting this ministry, was there a different mindset that you had specifically on the death penalty?
For me?
And if so or not, what tools can you recommend that one has to change their mind on the death penalty, say before?
When you started your ministry, specifically the
Death penalty.
Death penalty.
Abolition of death penalty, yeah.
right, the abolition, were you always of this mindset? And what advice would you give people that may not have that same mindset to maybe understand where you're coming from?
Great question. I never thought of the death penalty at all. It was not in my consciousness until I got that call from Theodora. And I started. And after Andrew was executed, I was at a meeting of the Illinois Conference of Churches, because I was very involved ecumenically. And we were going to meet with then Governor Ryan. Today he's dead, but was known as George Ryan because he was also convicted of crimes. Actually, 5 of our governors went to prison after their terms, which is not saying much for the governors of the state of Illinois. But in any case, a man named Bishop Imish from Joliet, Roman Catholic bishop, turned to me before the meeting with Ryan and said, the only reason you got involved with the death penalty is because that last person executed was Greek Orthodox. And I said, yes, you're right. That's why I got involved. But that's not why I stayed involved. My eyes were open to this reality. My father was a very strong personality, and it comes out in the book. And he was pro-death penalty, but he also taught me to be against the death penalty when he said to me, when it was reinstated in 1977, he said, you know, this is one thing we can't take back. We can't say, oops, we made a mistake. We can't bring that person back to life. He said, we better be sure. We better be damn sure that that person is guilty. We can't be damn sure. So to answer the first part of your question, I had nothing in my consciousness about that, never thought of it. I was pro-life, I was marching, I was the preborn were on my mind, the sick and suffering and euthanasia, that was in my mind, but never death row. The second part about how does one change that position, read my book. A lot of people have. 2 people so far that I know of did come to me. One of them is an archon, actually, and said that it did change his perspective. I think if you get involved in the inner workings, Andrew taught me a lot. Andrew said, you know, when I tried to help him, I said, I'm going to try to advocate, I'm going to try to have your sentence vacated. He says, you know what, I don't think you'll be able to, but you can try. He was set. He said, it's all politics at this point. And he was right. It's all politics. It was a hard lesson to learn, but I learned it and continued the fight, even after his execution. So I hope you are inspired. Thanks.
One more question?
And then
Anyone?
I have a closing. This gentleman.
Please.
Somebody asked if the gentleman who got executed forgave himself, and I was curious if you had any advice on forgiving others and forgiving yourself.
Advice on?
Do you have any advice? He's bridging Andrew
Yeah.
in death row. He forgave himself.
I believe so.
And now the gentleman is asking, do you have any advice on how we can forgive ourselves and how we can forgive others?
I think I sort of answered that earlier. after you go to confession to your spiritual father and you hear those words of absolution, which are beautiful, the prayer is absolutely gorgeous. If you don't forgive yourself, if God can forgive you and you don't forgive yourself, it's a greater sin, in my book. God, who has every reason not to forgive us, right? Forgives us through his priest. You have to forgive yourself. How do you forgive others? That's a bigger step. And to hold that animosity and to hold the hatred and to hold resentment just eats at your insides. And it's better, you can let that go, forgive the person. I'm not saying you have to enter into a relationship with them again if they've hurt you so much. You can forgive them personally, which is the most difficult, or in your heart and pray to God that your forgiveness is heard. You don't know what pain that person who caused you pain is actually going through. What's in their heart? What did they do growing up? How were they affected? I'm sure Presbytera has something to say about all that being in her profession. We don't know what the other person is going through to cause the hurt in you. So I think if you reflect on that and say, so-and-so hurt me so much, I'm not going to forgive him ever, or her. And you think back and say, well, what's going on in that person's life that caused this? So if I reflect on that, maybe, because I know what's going on in my life, and I know why I do what I do, and sometimes it's not very nice. Oftentimes it's not very nice. But that's what I have to try to think about. Unfortunately, Nick knows a lot about that life of mine, and that's why I looked at him. But I think it's the same advice I'd give myself. What is the other person going through to cause that reaction in them to me?
How often, Lord, should I forgive?
Yeah, 70 times 7, yeah.
70 times 7. So with that, Your Grace, please, I know you have some closing remarks.
I do. I do. As we bring this evening to a close, I'd like to thank Father Nicholas Lowe for his gracious welcome and the entire community of St. John the Divine for your warmth and hospitality. Known far beyond this parish as a devoted pastor, retreat leader, and advocate for interfaith dialogue and compassionate service, Father Nicholas has a gift for helping people connect faith with everyday life. And that spirit of openness and care shared this evening in a beautiful way. It's always a joy and blessing to be with you. Nick, I'm especially grateful to you for guiding our conversation this evening with such thoughtfulness and care. For 40 years, we have shared friendship, collaboration, and more successful projects than I can count. And tonight was no exception. Your questions reflected both deep understanding and genuine curiosity, drawing out the heart of Grace Unbound in a way only a longtime friend and trusted collaborator could. You've always had a gift for bringing the human story to the forefront, and I'm honored to share this dialogue with you tonight.
Thank you, Your Grace.
I also wish to express my heartfelt thanks to those who made both this evening and my stay in Jacksonville so comfortable and welcoming. Carla Dixon, the parish's administrative assistant, and Sharon Guttridge, the parish's campus director, who I'm told nothing happens here without her, if that's true. Nick told me it, so it has to be true. And their care, attentiveness, and generosity of spirit worked quietly behind the scenes, yet were felt at every moment, creating an atmosphere of genuine hospitality and warmth for which I am deeply grateful. I'm equally thankful to all who so graciously prepared and offered the dinner and refreshments this evening, a tangible expression of this parish's love and fellowship. And, of course, to our dear friend Patrick Herbert of Spectrum Films for filming tonight's talk. I can always count on Patrick and you for a professional production. As we conclude, I would be delighted to greet you and sign copies of Grace Unbound, the Sacred Activism of an Orthodox Bishop. Some of you might have even procured the book already online, while others may wish to acquire one this evening. However the book found its way into your hands, I'm very deeply grateful and honored to personalize it for you. It's been a genuine joy to spend this time with all of you. Thank you again for your presence, your hospitality, and your shared spirit of faith and hope. You have made this evening truly memorable. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you,
Ms. Rickson, you want to say anything?
I know that all of you were just
Oh, yeah,
mesmerized by sharing the stories of the people that came into contact with His Grace and who were touched by His life and obviously who helped to shape His ministry. I encourage all of you, one of the beauties of the Orthodox Church is that His Grace is continuing a litany and a lineage of a church that has for 2,000 years been doing that level of activism. And sometimes I think the more freedom that we have, the more quiet we become, And I think your words today, Your Grace, I know they inspired me to look more into my heart about ways that I, as a priest, can be more active in not only our community but also in our city, and to speak for those who are marginalized. We see so much of that happening. So thank you for doing that, and I hope that all of you are also inspired. His Grace is going to be sitting here at the table here. You're more than welcome to kind of create a line. As you come up, please state your name clearly so that His Grace can sign the book and address it to you. As always, Your Grace, what would be the best way of them getting a hold of you if they've got questions about?
My email is very simple. Please don't laugh. It's Bishop Demetrios, Demetrios, @AOL.com. Also, I have a website, www.bishopdemetrios.com, spelled with E's. Also, you need to know, if you go to Amazon and look at the reviews, you'll find one that's one of the early readers of my book was Father, who did a beautiful review. You can look at that and be inspired with his review as well.